So your problem slide is your deck's first impression to potential investors, and it's the North Star that every other slide should align to, so you want to get it right. Honestly, I'd say that a weak problem slide is the root cause for 50% of the decks I toss. And I say root cause because sometimes I don't realize that the problem slide didn't make sense until I get to the market sizing slide or the solution or something else. Sorry if that doesn't make sense right now, it will in about 6 minutes. But finding, evaluating, and validating federal market problems is tricky because while the government has big missions and needs a lot of help, only some of those missions and needs are defined enough to support a venture-backable business. So in this video, I'm going to share my 3-part framework to find government problems, evaluate whether a problem can support a startup, and turn your analysis into a compelling problem slide. And for the first 7 days that this video is up, I'll also be reviewing a couple problem slides that I've gotten recently that the owners were nice enough to let me share about so you can see what good and bad looks like. Alright, so there are 5 ways I recommend searching for federal problems, and we'll be trying each one. So for this example, let's assume you're interested in IoT sensors and edge computing. So you're looking for problems in that general area. And first place we're going to look are white papers and congressional testimony. And these are written for broad audiences and might have literally been read out loud. So they tend to be high-level discussions of a problem, which is great if you're trying to get oriented to a space or understand big trends and priorities, but will probably be too vague to be your complete problem statement. But to give you a sense for what these look like, let's go to Google, put in some keywords related to what we're interested in looking for, add congressional testimony or government report or white paper, and let's take a look at what we get. And here we are. And there are a bunch. And if you're doing this for real, I'd look at all of these Google results. But let's open up the first one, and it has a little context initially, but pretty quickly it dives into what the government's interested in. So here's the title and who was speaking, a little introduction about the speaker, and so you've got a little bit of context about why this is interesting, but pretty quickly it's going to dive into the actual content of this testimony related to IoT and edge compute. Or if we're looking at this a little bit more closely, looks like they're really interested in securing IoT devices. That's good for us to keep track of. And I already read through this one, but if you keep reading, there are some interesting recommendations, like right here. And these recommendations are really going to be especially valuable for you because these could help you focus in on a problem and a solution set that your startup might be able to respond to. So like I said, these congressional testimonies and reports are great for a high-level understanding and to get oriented to a space, but they're probably going to be too high-level to build a startup around, so let's go to our second resource, GAO reports. And the GAO, or Government Accountability Office, is awesome because they research cost overruns, programmatic failures, and generally write about places where agencies are having problems. And the scope of the problems will vary. So you might find a GAO report on an issue that's way too big for you to address. Or you might find little bite-sized actionable stuff in those reports that a startup could solve. But big or small, these reports are really valuable because when the GAO shines a spotlight on an agency failing, that agency is going to do whatever they have to solve that problem. And if you have a clever solution and you're in the right place at the right time, it can really accelerate your customer engagement and sales timelines. And of course, if you find a GAO report that addresses a mega problem, so a problem that's too big for you to take on by yourself, well, you can always look for a piece of that problem that you could break off and address by itself, and that can be the great foundation for your startup. So let's go back to Google, and we're going to put in the keywords as before, IoT sensors and edge computing, but this time we're going to put GAO at the end. And you're going to notice that we're going to get a combination of actual GAO reports, like right here. This one says Government Accountability Office, that's from GAO, but it also has criticisms and reviews and analysis of those GAO reports. So we got these from GAO Tech, things from Amazon, other FedScoop. So these are going to be analyses of the report, which are also super helpful because they show interest from industry in solving that problem. So let's go open up this first report right here. And I got it open already right here. And you're going to notice a few things. First of all, we've got the title of it. As we scroll down, we've got a great little summary of the report as a whole. And one of the reasons I love GAO reports is that they tend to be full of charts and data that can help you with your customer targeting and market sizing. So I encourage you to spend some real time reading through these reports and especially focus on the annexes where a lot of the charts are contained. And I gotta say, just based on this congressional testimony review and the GAO report review, I think I'm seeing a trend around IoT and edge security. So that's gonna be something I want to tuck away when I'm thinking about what problem I want to go after. All right, problem source number 3. And that's gonna be sam.gov, which is where government RFPs get published. So you can come here to sam.gov, and then in the search bar, You're going to put in your keywords. So I put in IoT sensors and edge compute, and then I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to see what kinds of results come back. And here I got a couple that came up. So this one looks really interesting. At edge integration of virtual tech sprints. Actually, I know they said spring, but that's supposed to be sprint. So if we open that up, we can see what it was that the government was trying to achieve, what's the problem they were trying to solve, and some perspectives on how they would like it to be solved. So great. That gives us really, really clear guidance on exactly what kind of problems they're interested in and might be willing to pay you to solve. So that was a really great SAM result that we found. It was really on point, really helped us clarify our understanding of the problem. But let me be honest with you. In practice, the solicitations you find on SAM are going to be pretty difficult to read, and only a small part of each solicitation actually talks about the problem. So generally, I use SAM to refine my understanding of a problem once I've learned about it from the GAO report and the congressional testimony and some of those more big picture resources. But I usually don't use SAM as a way to identify problems in the first place. But sometimes it works, like it just happened for us. All right, now we have resource number 4, and that's going to be SBIR.gov. And SBIRs are small federal grants to research and develop solutions to a government problem. So SBIR solicitations and award documents are a treasure trove of small but clear government problems that a startup could definitely solve. Now, are these problems big enough to support a company? Well, maybe, maybe not. But if you find a big problem in your white paper and GAO research and find a few SBIRs to fund research for solutions to pieces of that big problem, well, now that sounds really promising. The big problem indicates that this problem could support a venture scale business, and the SBIRs are a great on-ramp and funding source to get you going. So come over here to SBIR.gov, and then we're going to come in here to the portfolio, and under keywords, I'm going to put in some of my keywords. So let's start with IoT sensors. And I'm going to hit search, and you can see here's a whole list of solutions that the government has funded to problems related to IoT sensors. So take a look at this, look for the trends, and see if you see a consistent theme around a problem that the government was trying to solve. And a quick reminder, these are solutions, so you'll have to back into what the problem was behind each of these solutions. So don't just think that you can copy this solution and make it your own. And another quick note on this one, a lot of people assume that if an SBIR has already been awarded, that means that somebody else has already solved the problem. And this couldn't be further from the truth. These grants have an extremely low success rate. So odds are, whatever problem the government was trying to solve a couple of years ago, that problem still exists. And that leads me to the last place to find government problems, which is talking to govies. And this technique generally leads to the best problems, but it's also generally the hardest because government employees are notoriously non-responsive. There are a million reasons why, but bottom line, if you cold email government employees on LinkedIn, you're probably going to have an extremely low success rate. So if you want to talk to govies, I highly encourage you to attend conferences, trade shows, and find ways to get warm introductions to them. But even though it's a pain, I encourage you to try. There is no substitute for talking to customers for 15 minutes. The amount you'll learn about their problems, even in a few minutes, is astounding. Next, let's evaluate the problems that you've found. And this is important because, like I said before, there are a lot of government missions that sound great, but that can't support a venture scale startup. And here's how I like to do this. I make a 2x2 matrix, and on the top are our high urgency problems. So problems that need to be solved in the next 24 months. On the bottom are our low urgency problems. Problems where no one's going to get fired if it's still a problem in a couple years. On the right are our high importance problems. So these are things that are mission critical. And on the left are our low importance problems. So maybe they're more of an annoyance than a problem. So let's go through a couple examples. So a high importance, high urgency problem was the development of MRAPs, which were basically bomb-proof vehicles we used in Iraq and Afghanistan. So in the mid-2000s, a lot of service members were getting killed by buried explosives, and protecting troops is urgent and important, so it goes here. Next, we have important but low urgency problems, and infrastructure spending is a good example. Having working bridges and roads is mission critical for leaders at the Department of Transportation, Commerce, and DoD. But if we delay the maintenance of spending by a year, is anyone going to get fired? Probably not. Next, we have our high urgency, low importance. And the best examples here is end of year buying. So every year the government flushes a ton of cash in September to comply with government budgeting requirements. They have to spend the money by September 31st, but the money typically gets spent on pet projects. So stuff that's less important. And then we have our low urgency, low importance stuff. And there's a lot of stuff that lives in here. For example, the DoD has a garbage personnel records management system, but while the DoD has to track people, it's not one of their top missions, and the system sucks. but it kinda works so it isn't urgent. And now, I'd also put political issues here, like gun control or family planning related problems. Democrats and Republicans agree that these are problems, but they are 180 degrees from each other on what the problem is, so nothing happens. So, as you find problems, try to map them onto this 2x2 matrix. And I encourage you to try to roughly size the problems. So problems that are expensive get big dots, and small problems get small dots. And we want to find problems that are high importance and high urgency. For now, don't worry about how big the problem is. If the problem's too big, that's fine, but you'll want to identify a piece of it to focus on initially. For example, as a startup, you aren't going to design and build the entire MRAP, but there are hundreds of small systems and components in an MRAP that you could make. And if the problem is too small to build a business around, that's fine too. We just need to figure out how to make that small problem the first step on your way to solving something bigger. But that's it. And once you're here, you've done 90% of the work for your problem slide. Alright, so other than being important and urgent, what do good problem statements have in common? Here's my list. First, they're tactical. They tend to be in the weeds, stuff that will bore your friends and family at parties. If you describe the government problem you solve and people are like, that's so cool, you're probably focused on too big and too mission-y of a problem. Boring is good. Second, good government problems sound a lot like good commercial problems. I'm a dual-use investor, so we almost always invest in products that the government and industry could both be interested in, which means that the government and industry need to have generally the same problem. Third, the government is not profit motivated. So if your problem is principally about helping the government save money or becoming more efficient, I'm going to be skeptical. If solving the problem would cut costs as a peripheral benefit, then that's great. But that probably can't be the primary selling point. Fourth, choose problems you have some unique connection to. I get a lot of Ivy League founders pitching me on solutions to problems in the construction or extractives or manufacturing space. And unless you went to Harvard but come from a coal mining family, I'm going to be skeptical that you really know the space. Just choose stuff you're connected to. Fifth, this slide needs to convince me that you started with a problem and built a solution to it. I can't tell you how many times I meet a founder who's developed a solution first and then gone to go look for a problem. This never works. And if I get a whiff that this is a hammer looking for a nail type situation, I'm going to be extremely skeptical. And I guess my sixth one is actually a foot stomp about urgency. I can't overstate how important it is. Government agencies plan and allocate their budgets 2 to 3 years ahead of time, so the budget the government is spending today was allocated and planned 2 to 3 years ago. But as a startup, you need to go from sales pitch to contract award in a couple months. And the only way to do that is if the government feels so much pressure, that there's so much urgency, that they find a way to get you that money. Hence the importance of urgency. Now, let's turn our findings into a problem statement. And I think the best way to do this is with a Mad Lib. So fill in the user, what their goal is, and what the problem that they have is. So for example, maybe this is our problem. Government grants managers struggle to track the impact of the grants they manage because there's no standardized device for recording impact in the field. And our goal with this Mad Lib is to help us focus and summarize all our findings. Now, let's build your problem slide. And this will be pretty easy. First, put your Mad Lib at the top or left side of the slide so that readers can read that first. So, something like this. Then we're going to use the rest of the slide to flesh out the details of the problem. So we're going to provide any context on the problem that a reader needs to understand it. We're going to want to give a sense for how much pain this problem is causing, preferably expressing that in qualitative and quantitative terms. So we could give a couple data points on how much this problem is impacting the government today, or some data on how much the government's spending to solve it today. We want to share what evidence there is that the government wants to solve this problem in the near future, or what evidence is there that this problem is going to get worse and become more urgent soon, or evidence that the current solutions just aren't working. We're also going to want to give details of the customer, if that's helpful. And for bonus points, I love it when there's a picture of the founder experiencing that problem themselves. Legitimately, if there's a picture of the founder sitting there frustrated by whatever it is, I look at everything that falls in the deck differently because I know that they're speaking from their own experience. So here's my example of what this slide could look like. In the upper left, we've got some quantities about what the problem is creating today. In the upper right, we've got some explanation about why the government has to solve this problem quickly. In the lower left, we've defined who the customer is. And in the lower right, we've got a picture of ourselves with the connection to this problem, because it validates that I started with the problem before I came up with a solution. Now, I'm not saying that this is the only way to structure your problem slide, and we'll be looking at some other ways here in a second, but I do think that this is a really solid approach. And alright, if this video has been up for less than a week, let's jump into some feedback on a couple problem slides I've gotten recently and from companies that were nice enough to let me share their slides. And if this part has already been taken down, consider subscribing so you get an alert when the next video comes out, so you make sure to see these little quick hits. And there are 10 core pitch deck slides, so to get some help with the next one, click the thumbnail on the left. And we're on track to put out 45 pitch, grant proposal, and other federal funding tutorials in the next 12 months, so subscribe to catch them all.